and as a way to deal with a much bigger issue of that era.
I think the later part of the 19th century had difficulties with confronting the problem of a powerful woman. One of the ways that they tried to deal with the problem of this powerful woman was to say that Elizabeth was an anomaly. There was something either wrong with her, or she was, in fact, the other way is that she was a man.
In the royal family, a powerful and independent woman refusing to marry was a big deal.
Parliament and the Privy Council spent a lot of time petitioning her, pressuring her, asking her to choose a husband and get pregnant and have an heir. If Elizabeth were to die as a single woman, without an heir of her body that everyone in England could accept as the next ruler, then the crown was up in the air.
Despite the pressure, Queen Elizabeth doesn't succumb to becoming a desperate housewife, fueling rumors and questions of why. But perhaps her parents didn't set her the best example. You might have a dim view of marriage, too, if your father cut off your mother's head. Queen Elizabeth I's gender counted against her from the moment she was born. It was a strike against her mother as well, Anne Boleyn.
I think Henry was disappointed that Elizabeth was daughter. I think he was obviously hoping for a son.
Anne Boleyn was King Henry's second wife. His first, Catherine of Aragon, had borne him a daughter, Mary. When Catherine was almost past childbearing age, a young, attractive, and flirtatious Anne became the apple of the king's eye.
I beseech you now with all my heart, definitely, to let me know your whole mind as to the love between us. For necessity compels me to plague you for a reply, having been for more than a year now struck by the dart of love, and being uncertain either of failure or of finding a place in your heart and affection.
Henry's love letters to Anne gush with a fervent desire to marry her. But the Pope refuses to grant him a divorce. Then King Henry has a great idea. He decides to leave the Catholic Church and declare himself divine leader of the Church of England. He petitions to the church courts to have his marriage with Catherine annulled. But before they act, Anne gets pregnant.
When Anne Boleyn was pregnant, everyone convinced themselves it was bound to be a boy. Certainly Henry did. We know that from the letters that were sent out to announce the birth of a prince, and then people have gone through writing a little S on the end so that it says princess.
On September 7th, 1533, Elizabeth is born. King Henry is disappointed. He wants to try again, but the results are even more upsetting.
The record of Anne's pregnancies while she's queen is rather curious. Princess Elizabeth is born. The following year, 1534, she thinks she's pregnant, but as we know, no child appears. What we then know is that she was pregnant at the end of 1535, early 1536, but then there is a miscarriage.
There's debate as to how this disappointment affects King Henry's feelings for his wife.
Some scholars suppose that Henry is getting rather fed up with Anne, that what he wanted at all costs was a son, and this was causing him doubts about the marriage. I'm not so sure.
Your Majesty.
What is certain is shortly after the miscarriage, King Henry has the Queen arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. The charges against her are scandalous.
What Anne was accused of in May 1536 was that she had committed adultery with 5 men, including incest with her brother.
The rumours that Anne Boleyn was having affairs, it's difficult to trace exactly how they reached Henry. But when Henry learnt about them, he appears to have believed them. In my view, Anne Boleyn did not have affairs. I think she played flirtatiously with people at her court, but the court was a place where one would be extremely foolish to have affairs.
All 5 men are found guilty.
They were executed, and painfully so. There was no escape for them.
There's no escape for the Queen either. King Henry wants to ground his wife, Tudor style. Princess Elizabeth's mother, Anne Boleyn, is ordered beheaded by her father. Elizabeth is not yet 3 years old.
If you're found guilty of treason, hanging, drawing, quartering, disemboweling, your body dismembered, tarred, pickled, stuck on gates or bridges, was a warning. For you to suffer the dignity of Anne Boleyn's death, simply beheading, was a great act of mercy and compassion. And in the circumstances, one that most people would beg for.
King Henry's final gesture of affection for his wife is to hire an executioner from France to chop off her head. A sword was cleaner and quicker than an axe, which could take 2 swings.
Quite often, either due to nerves or drink, the executioner did bungle executions. It was common practice. That's why you get the practice of the victim often paying the executioner something.
Pray for me, ladies.
Anne kneels bravely and says her prayers. The executioner picks up his sword behind her.
To Jesus Christ.
Then just before striking, he asks for his sword, so the Queen doesn't know it's coming.
Give me my sword. Jesus Christ, I can never.
Elizabeth will soon learn a valuable lesson. Life in Tudor England can be cruel. The charges of adultery may not have been true, but if they were, they would raise a provocative question.
If Anne Boleyn was sleeping round, it is possible that Princess Elizabeth, born in September 1533, might just possibly not have been Henry VIII's daughter. Who knows? It is just possible. In the end, probably unlikely. It's one of these things which is unprovable, but it's worth just leaving the possibility open.
Upon the death of her mother, Elizabeth takes another blow. She is shunned and removed from the line of succession to the throne. King Henry marries his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, and she gives him the son he had always wanted, Prince Edward.
And it was only about 1543 that Henry began to think again about the succession and realized that it was very insecure. He only had 1 young son, and he needed to ensure that it would continue within his line by making both Mary and Elizabeth his heirs.
Now at the age of 10, Princess Elizabeth is officially reinstated and 3rd in line to the throne. Just 3 years later, when she's 13, her father, King Henry VIII, dies. The young princess moves in with her stepmother, who quickly marries a close friend, Thomas Seymour. What happens next between the princess and her stepfather will be a scandal. One so salacious, it may be the reason she avoided marriage entirely.
Please stop.
Elizabeth was just a 13-year-old princess when word spread of bedroom romps with her stepfather, Thomas Seymour.
We have evidence from eyewitnesses of Thomas Seymour coming into his stepdaughter's bedroom in the morning and waking her up before she had put on her clothes for the day. So she was in bed in her bedclothes, tickling her, having sort of a sexualized teasing.
He slaps her buttocks and holds her in long embraces. Many in her court find the relationship inappropriate.
It happened over a period of months, and Elizabeth grew increasingly uncomfortable with these episodes. But it seems pretty clear that Elizabeth did, at times, fall under the spell of Seymour's charms.
Thomas Seymour is said to be attractive, tall, athletic, and charismatic. And many believe he is using his charm to woo the impressionable teenager, possibly to satisfy his own ambitions.
If Seymour married Elizabeth, he would have immediately been such a powerful figure in the kingdom. Any children that they had of that legal marriage would have been in the succession, and when Elizabeth became Queen of England, if she did, he would be her husband, the King of England.
When Seymour's wife, Catherine Parr, dies, he conspires to marry the young princess. Some say by trying to plant his seed. Rumors he did not quell, but encouraged. His fate, though, is sealed when the 12-year-old King Edward learns of his uncle's plot to marry Elizabeth. His scheme was neither good for his soul nor his head. As for Elizabeth, Thomas's death has a lasting effect, one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Yet, was the Seymour affair enough to put her off marriage?
Many people have things happen to them in their childhood or their early adolescence that don't predetermine their whole life. So to say that this Seymour episode cemented in Elizabeth the opinion that she would never marry, I think is overreaching.
But just a few years later, Elizabeth's life takes a dramatic turn when King Edward dies. Her half-sister Mary takes the throne, but lasts a mere 5 years before she gets sick and dies too. Then, at age 25, Elizabeth, the illegitimate daughter who'd once been booted from the line of succession, rises to the country's highest post, the Queen of England. In her mind, it was destiny.
This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes.
Elizabeth was a very young